Welcome to the 1974 podcast. This week we are joined by current members Mike Forget, John Dodson, Nick Dickinson, Nicole Dickinson, and Adam Clymer, along with former members Gary Dione and Angela Doherty, to discuss the origins of what would become the Lazer trilogy, with 1974's release, 1974 and the Battle for the Lazer Fortress. I'm Adam Clymer, and this is 1974, the podcast. So we have Mike Forget. Say hi, Mike.
Hello.
We have the wonderful Gary Dione.
Hi.
Our current drummer and singer, Nick and Nicole Dickinson.
Hello. Hi.
Hello. We have down here, we have Angela Doherty is the new name. I only know you from your prior to being married name.
Yeah, you did it. You said it right.
Well, Angela, can I say it is lovely. We haven't seen you in ages, and it's so nice to see you and hear from you and talk about the good old times. The last little box on my screen is John Dodson. How are you, my friend?
I am good. How are you?
Fantastic. And John's our current bass player right now, so welcome, everyone. I'm going to turn the mic over real quick to Forgy to tell us what it is we're discussing today. What are we talking about today, Forge?
We're talking about the first album, at least in terms of our band's history, in the Lazer trilogy, the three albums that fit together to form this gigantic story. So that's the theme for today.
All right, so let me quick start with the Lazer trilogy was about an 8-year endeavor for 1974, spanning 3 albums, a fairly long, intense story, probably about 8 or 9 different members and iterations of the band. What we're going to try and do is have everybody from past and present over the next couple of podcasts chat a little bit about what it was like playing this music live, writing it, recording it, and essentially just being in the band. So let me direct this question to Gary and Forge. What is the Lazer Fortress?
That's a very great question. I think Forge can answer that for us.
No, because you know who came up with the words Lazer Fortress next to each other? That would be Gary Dione.
True. The Lazer Fortress itself is a grid that surrounds the Earth to protect it from galactic invasion. I think that's, thank you.
Now, this is based on fact, or was this made up?
Yes. You ever seen it?
No, I can't. Too much light pollution where I am.
Yeah, that's exactly what's happening. No, Gary was the one that came up with the idea of Lazer Fortress. Before that, we had no story. And then we were like, Gary, what is Lazer Fortress? And he's like, I don't know. It just sounds awesome. So then we started writing a story around that because it sounded awesome. But like back then, so I guess the music for Lazer Fortress started before the word Lazer Fortress did. Because the very first thing ever written for the Lazer Fortress was the opening riff for the overture, which was literally written the last day we recorded A Soldier's Tale, like the original Soldier's Tale, not like the new one, which was done in like February of 2009. So like literally we wrapped on recording Soldier's Tale at this place up in like New Hampshire or something like that. And then I was like, hey guys, check out this riff. And I played it. And like that was the first thing ever that was written for the album. And
I have that in my notes too, actually.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
We remember that the same way then. That's awesome. And then from February 2009 to February 2011, that's this band in which it was written, the music was written, the story was written, and it was recorded. And then we released it on February 18th. So
let me ask you a question here. Forge, did you think this was going to be a 3-album trilogy when you initially began writing with the lineup of the time?
I don't think anyone thought that was going to be the case. The lineup at the time was, it was Nick Garofalo was our one of our guitar players then. I was the other guitar player. Gary was on bass. Tim was on drums, and
Dan Niederhauser.
And originally in 2009, when the first riff was written for Lazer Fortress, Dan Niederhauser was our keyboardist, but he very soon after left. And then Adam Clymer joined on keys.
Adam, go ahead and introduce yourself.
My name is Adam Clymer, and I played keyboards at one point in this band, in the in the second lineup after Dan Niederhauser left. So let me ask current members and Angela, when you first heard Laser Fortress, having essentially no part of that, what was the reaction coming from the local music scene?
Do you remember where you were?
I was at the space. That is the first time I saw you, was in the space. There was literally nobody in the crowd except for me, 4G's sister and her boyfriend at the time, and I think another one of our friends. So there was 4 of us in the audience, and that was it. And we were in the space. No, and Nick Garofalo's girlfriend was there too. But she was standing very far away from us. And that was it. And I just remember, like, even though there was no one there, I was just dancing the whole time. I fucking loved it. So I was like 100% into it from day one. I didn't listen to the album at all. I just remember 4G's sister being like, hey, come see my brother's band. Like, you know, I really want you to come so that I can go and see him. It's going to be in this really cool place. And I'd never been at the space before. I had never seen the band before. And I don't think I'd ever met Mike before even. So I was just like, yeah, awesome. I'm 21. I don't give a fuck about anything. So... yeah, now if you asked me to do that, I'd be like, ew, gross, I'm playing Animal Crossing. But, yeah, I loved it immediately. And then I bought the album, and I listened to it pretty much nonstop.
How about Nicole and Nick or John? You know, what were your first thoughts?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. I've played with so many bands that shared a bill with 1974, and I'm trying to think what the first band was. But I want to say maybe The Insurance. I was playing drums for The Insurance. Maybe it was at like the Zen Bar or something like that. I can't even remember where it was.
We frequented the Zen Bar. We were like the house band for a while.
Yeah, I played a few shows at the Zen Bar with you guys, I think. And I just remember like not knowing anything about the band, and just hearing like prog rock, local prog rock, and I was like, oh, I wish I could play that. Like, that's like all the bands I played in were like, they're good bands, don't get me wrong. I love all the bands I played with, but like there's like that musical itch that like I couldn't scratch, because I was doing like pop rock or hip hop or rock, like heavy stuff, but there was like actual like real musicianship going on. I'm like, oh, this is really cool. I like this.
I think the first time we ever ran into Nick and Nicole was we were at Arch Street and we were sharing a bill with Little Ugly, I believe. I think that was the first time we were ever introduced to Nick and Nicole.
That sounds right.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah, because I was in the band at that point.
Yeah, well, we weren't sure about like the first album, because we started dating in 2012. So I distinctly remember the second album and seeing you guys play with that, but I don't have like a shining one memory from Lazer. But a lot of my favorite songs are on that album.
And I just got the album yesterday, and I had a chance to listen to it, and it was pretty cool. No, I mean, at the time, hearing a band, furthering John's point a little bit, being local prog rock, but local prog rock doing concept albums was very interesting, coming from someone that being like a Dream Theater fan, Rush fan, where stuff had concepts throughout the whole record. You didn't really get that with any other group in Connecticut. It was all very single oriented and individual songs where you didn't have anything tying them together. So that was the biggest thing that kind of struck me. Musicianship aside, people that could actually play, and seeing Gary move around on stage was always a wonder for me.
I tried.
We enjoy seeing Gary move around on stage. 4G, which came first? This giant overlapping story that went into what Laser Fortress was, or the music of Laser Fortress, the songs? Which came first?
At first it was the music, because we didn't have a theme for the thing. And I think we started writing the overture before we wrote anything else. So we started with this instrumental. It started off being like a riff, and then we added another thing to it, and then we added another thing to it. And at the time, and I really wish he could be here to speak about this, but Nick Garofalo, the other guitar player in the band, he kept pushing to make it bigger, more epic, more dual guitar harmonies, more whatever. So like that sort of like that overture is kind of what got written first. And there was no story behind it, and there still is no story tied to the overture. It's literally like an overture is just, you know, music that takes pieces of like a musical and puts it all together and weaves it through. So we actually built the overture first, And then from the overture, when Gary came up with the idea of Lazer Fortress and we started hammering out some of the details of what the story was, we would take those themes that we put into the overture and we either flesh them out in songs or we would, tease them in a song or something like that. And at that point in time, it was kind of 50-50. Like we might write a song and then say, what does that sound like? That sounds like it could be this part of the story. Or we might write a song and say, what does that sound like? We don't know. Oh, what if this song was like a time where blah, blah, blah happens? And we were kind of doing both at the same time after the overture was written.
It was like partially the music was writing the story, and part of it, the story was writing the music.
Yeah.
Depending upon which one. I also remember distinctly that at one point we were talking about making it a double album, and the overture was going to be an entire CD. And the other CD would be the songs based on the overture. So the ridiculousness pretty much started from the beginning. And
I just want to go on record that never went away. That concept of an album, one song album, and then a second album being the album came back to haunt us again for Death of the Herald and Echoes of War. And I would just like to say, as a current guitar player in the band, I'm glad we never did that.
The jury's still out, okay?
Oh, I knew it. It's going to happen. You wait.
That would have worked out well for like open mic nights where you can only play 3 songs or 15 minutes. You go, guys, we just got one really good song we want to play. It just happens to be 45 minutes long.
It's an hour. Sorry.
It's an hour.
No.
So we don't say anything during it. It's great.
So Gary, why a 15-minute overture in the classical musical style to open this album? Nobody knew who 1974 was. The music wasn't, as Nick was saying, the music was not typical to what was in the scene at the time. Why choose a classical trope to open a rock album?
Because I think it was a ridiculous idea, and I think that's why we did it. We're kind of feeding off each other of like how ridiculous can we keep making these things, but also make them well. So yeah, that's pretty much why. It's because it was awesome.
I also like to add at the time, we weren't plugged into any sort of music scene. Like we were doing practice like every Sunday, and it was really just for us. Like we weren't trying to market this for anybody in Connecticut, or we had no like manager or venue we were associated with. Like we were just doing this because we thought it would be fun, funny, ridiculous, and we could also kind of push our own boundaries in terms of what we could write and what we could play. We weren't a performing band. We didn't have a lot of live shows at the time. So we weren't even thinking of like, hey, this would be a good song to play live. It was literally writing music to record it and put it out and say, this is something that we created.
So let me ask then, and I'll aim this towards Angela. What was it like to have to learn the overture coming into this band later on? I'll save John, Nicole, and Nick because we haven't picked it up since. So
you don't play the overture anymore?
No, we don't.
I'm done with this pod. That is a tragedy. Well, learning it, first of all, I will say that even though I played the keyboard, I don't think I'm very good at playing the keyboard. Like, I think that I know how to play the keyboard in my head, but when I try and do it, the message doesn't come out right. So, like, as most of you know, I had to play with sheet music, which I had to transpose either by myself or with Mike, and the two of us just like, is that a D? Ding, 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 ding. Okay, yeah, that's a D. And like, it took us to transcribe everything from.
Well, I apologize. I apologize for writing all of that.
Yeah,
stuff.
do keep in mind a lot of the keyboard stuff was written by Adam.
A lot of I remember it would just be like, I would be like, so Clymer, can you what'd you do for this part? And you'd be like, oh no, I just like improv that part every time. And I was like, what is improv? Because like, I was classically trained. Yeah, I played piano for years, but like, I'd never improvised anything in my life. So like, no, I wrote down everything I played. I played the same thing every night. I never went off script, and learning it was crazy because I don't have that ear like for music when it comes to the keyboard, when it comes to any instrument. I cannot hear something and play it. I can't do it. It has to be on paper for me. So it was an extraordinary process. One might say that it was like actually a little amazing that we did it, like that we managed to actually write the music out on sheet paper for me. Like, that's incredible that we did that just sitting like drunk in this teeny tiny sunroom. Like, what the fuck note is that? And like having to like pick it out from like all the other instruments too. So it was wild. It was wild, but we did it. And I played it like a lot. I played it a lot.
The overture is definitely one of the more interesting things we've done, and especially to open up an album.
Who played the unplugged electric guitar strum right at the beginning of the overture? That's a big question.
Yeah, so the band played their main instruments, right? Like I played guitar, Nick played guitar, Gary played bass, Tim played drums, and Adam Clymer played keyboards. It's like that throughout the majority of the song. Like from the 55-second mark all the way to the end, that's the instrumentation.
Was that the instrumentation that lasted through the rest of the album?
Mostly depends on the song. That sets up the main instruments for everybody. The only thing that was different on the overture was there's like a 55 second, maybe minute long intro of just like ambient sound effects. So the first swell is a guitar swell that's just done through an effect on my Line 6. It was an M9 at the time, and now I have it on my Helix, called a particle verb, where it's just 100% the reverb, so you don't hear any of the actual guitar sound coming from. It's just the reverb is that swelling guitar, weird ethereal sound. And then there's a bunch of sound effects on that thing. There's someone sipping through a straw. There's someone taking like a comic book plastic sleeve and just crinkling it. It makes a crinkle sound. There's Gary coughing in the back because he was sick, and we slowed it down, and it sounds like some demonic thing. Tim had this fan in the sun porch that when you turned off the fan in the sun porch, it would make this rattling sound as it wound down. That's in there. We recorded Tim stomping on the deck, which is where we recorded the majority of the, at least the majority of the a lot of the instruments on the album. I think
playing cymbals with pennies, I think.
Oh, we took like a colander, or it was some sort of round. It was like a bowl, like a metal bowl, and like you were taking like something and you were hitting the outside of it.
Yeah.
That was you, Gary, right?
I think so.
Yeah,
that was my contribution.
That was your no, and your cough. And your cough.
This was the beginning of sound effects on 1974 albums. Is that safe to say? Yeah,
and we had no idea what we like. I don't think we had an end result in terms of what we wanted it to sound like. We just wanted it to sound like a lot of weird stuff was happening. So it sounds like a lot of weird stuff is happening. Mission accomplished.
From there, we take quite the departure in this album. So we have a vocalless 15-minute overture into probably one of the more beautiful songs that I think 74 has done, called Intro. I'm going to direct this to 4G because I believe a lot of the vocal arrangement came specifically from 4G on this. So talk to us a little bit how we go from kind of a balls-out rocker overture, lots of strange times and loud, crazy distortion guitars, to something as delicate as Intro.
I think a part of it was meant to transition from one key to the other, because overture ends in E minor, and we then needed to switch somehow to D minor. So we created, there's like a feedback at the end of overture, which is in a certain note, and then we took that note and then we built just this 4-chord progression that can transition from that note, which I think is like I don't know what the note is. I know it's an E chord that's strummed, but we should transition from that into the D minor, which is what we did for War That Tears Apart the Sky. And we thought that dynamically coming out of the overture, which was just like this like 16-minute assault on like your senses. I mean, it's got dynamics in there. It gets really quiet when it goes into like sort of the middle part of the overture where Gary's doing is the bass line that he created. We wanted something that like could bring it down so that War That Tears Apart the Sky could bring it back up again. And yeah, I wrote the vocals, and Tim's got such an operatic style to his voice that we thought that he should get the main part, and that the other two voices, which sound very feminine, that's me singing harmony on top of that. And it was to establish the idea that we're not an instrumental band. So it kind of like the overture showcases the instrumentation. Intro is just a very quick turnaround to put it into the right key, but also showcases sort of like the vocal arrangement ability. Which again, we had no intention of necessarily performing live. It was just supposed to be, you sit down and you listen to this and you kind of enjoy this like you would enjoy a concept album in its entirety, to like stay with it and kind of go with the ebb and flow of the music. So we had that in mind when we were creating that song. Except
for that time that we did play the entire thing beginning to end live.
Yes, for the Herald released album, we did both albums back to back. Yeah, I remember.
I remember that too, there, buddy. I was like, I don't think you're right.
No. But what I'm saying is that the intention was never to perform that song, like any of these songs. These songs weren't written to be performed live, even though we have played them live. It was written as a bridge between two pieces to keep the music going and introduce it's sort of like an ominous, if you listen to the lyrics, it's basically, if you forget the past, you will be doomed to repeat it. So don't forget the past. Here's the story of the Lazer Fortress.
So before we jump into what comes after intro, you're talking about now we're learning lessons. We're trying to put essentially ideas in place for this, what would become the Lazer trilogy. By the time we get to our third song on the album, which is War That Tears Apart the Skies, have we now established at that point in the writing process that this is going to be a story, this is going to be a concept album, as opposed to just trying to do something a little bit more prog and cool?
Yeah, so intro was definitely one of the later songs written, because it was written as a gap, as a bridge between songs and with a story intent. War That Tears Apart the Sky was also a song that was written with a story in mind. So we had already figured out at this point in time that the story would begin with a spaceship battle where, even though you don't learn about it in the song War That Tears Apart the Sky, a squad is attacked by another squad, which ends up being clones of the squad that was attacked. And it's this like gigantic, we're losing, and then they end up winning. In the end, like the squad whose ship was just randomly attacked, and we thought that was going to be the start of unraveling this mystery about something weird is going on, and then from there the story progresses into the ongoings of Lazer Fortress, the battle for Lazer Fortress story. I could also say that while we were writing this story, while we were writing the story for the battle for the Lazer Fortress, we had to, someone, I don't remember who it was, but someone kept asking how, why, when. Like, there were all these questions. Like, when we were like, okay, so the spaceship gets attacked by its clones. Why? How? How did it get there? Why are there clones? Like, what led to that?
It was me being the newest member at that point going, I don't get any of this.
So what that created was we had to put a history in place to describe what was happening on the album Battle for the Lazer Fortress. And nowhere on the album Battle for the Lazer Fortress does it describe why everything has happened the way it has. It's literally just, they're thrown right in the middle of some weird stuff's going on. And so we didn't ever got a chance in the Battle for Lazer Fortress to describe why the setup, like why was it all that way? Like, why did clones decide to attack their original counterparts in outer space?
It was pretty much Clymer asking why, and then Tim explaining why, and it just kept getting ramped up more and more from there.
Oh yeah, and when Tim explained why, it was never something like, "Oh okay, that makes sense." It was always something like, "What? How are we going to work that into the story?"
And then the moon explodes. Oh, okay.
That was my favorite. That's my favorite. And then they blow up the moon. Like, You can't blow up the moon. No, that's what happens. They blow up the moon.
Why? Well, I don't want to know why.
We hope to get Tim in on this a little later on, or at least for the next albums we chat about. But a lot of the story did originate from Tim, and I'm pretty sure, and I will leave him to comment later, that he made it up as he went, and we were the fools that just wrote music to it at that point.
Yep.
Definitely some of the more...
That's exactly it.
Some of the more out there ideas was definitely him. And then Nick Garofalo, the guitar player, he'd be the type that if someone said why, his response was always like, why not?
So with War That Tears Apart the Skies, we finally get for the first time the semblance of what you would call maybe a single or like a pop song. You know, a verse, a chorus, a guitar solo, a very catchy chorus melody. Let me ask Nick and Nicole, who've been able to play this with us now at almost every gig, what are your thoughts, having not been part of the writing process of that song? How do you interpret that song when we go out and play that? Nicole, how do you feel about that song?
I think it's like a good one to get the crowd involved.
Yeah.
I always get the songs.
I know. I just got the album.
There's so many songs. I forget the title sometimes. But yeah, I think it's a good one because the crowd like immediately can pick up on the O part and the what-oh part and join in. So it's kind of like they start listening to whatever songs we have before that and they're like, okay, this is cool. And then they're like, oh, I can sing along. I don't know. That's kind of my point of view, I guess.
How about you, Nick? What is your thought behind the kit when it comes time to do this tune?
I don't know. I just play the song.
That was such a pure answer.
It really was.
Like, I would just like to say that I appreciate like the simple honesty of that answer. I just play the song. Like
you put it on the paper, and I just got to play it, man. I got no other options yet.
yeah. So, like, what am I going to do? Not play the song?
We haven't forgot about you, John. We're just trying to find songs that you've been in the band for like 2 weeks, and we went on quarantine.
Yeah. I do remember hearing that though the first time. I want to say it was a show we did when I was in High Adventure, one of the Comic-Con type shows we did, and just again, like to reiterate what I said before, like just hearing like anything, even though you say this is more of a pop song, to me I was like, oh, this is what I love. This is the prog stuff I love, and just being blown away by it.
Gary, so this became a staple of our live set. I don't think there was a single show we played after this album, after the writing of this song, that this particular song didn't get put into the set. What were your contributions to the creation of War That Tears Apart the Sky?
I'm trying to think. For this song, not much. I think Forgy wrote most of the music for this song.
Yeah, I was on a huge Cambria kick when I wrote this song.
This album.
This was mostly like a 4G penned song.
Yeah, I added the bass intro, which was actually from the overture to that song. And actually, pretty much the bass line for the part before the verses is lifted directly off of the overture. So,
but you bring up an interesting point. Very uncommon do you get an overture prior to the rest of an album or a classical piece. You get an overture written at the end to incorporate themes, incorporate all kind of other things that came. For Lazer Fortress, was the overture written first and then themes were taken from it? Or had we had almost all of it written and then we wrote the overture to kind of put an intro to the album? Which came first, the chicken or the egg?
I think we wrote the overture first and then incorporated parts of that into the rest of the songs we wrote.
That's very interesting.
And I think that sometimes we would add little embellishments from the overture later, but for the most part, it was the overture first, and then
The only time I think, I can't remember. I can't remember if this is jumping a gun, but like if the Wait part of the overture was written for the actual song Wait, or if Wait was written before that. I want to say Wait was actually written before that part of the overture. The da 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 da. Like I can't remember though. I can't remember which came first. I can't go on record.
I think he might have written the song. And then we created the overture, and then you added the outro that was from the overture later.
The song wasn't written until it had to have been after March of 2010, because I remember, we'll get there later, but like it was definitely written after March of 2010. So I don't know which one came first. But yeah. So I was actually going to mention that riff that Gary has in the beginning is the riff from the quiet part of the overture. And the other thing, interesting thing about that song was originally, so yeah, I wrote like the lyrics, the melody, and the chord progression. But in the riff, but like there was at one point in time there was a skiffle intro to War That Tears Apart the Sky that we nixed. The part where Tim comes in on the drum kit and he's just hitting toms and stuff like that. That was originally like
like a walking bass line.
Yeah, originally, and
that went away.
Yeah, we did change it. I think for the better that decision.
Yep.
I feel like a lot of changes came along when I came along, because there was finally someone to come in and be like, "Hey, I listened to this and it's garbage."
What the hell was that?
There's two that I remember, and that was one of them.
Yeah, I got a phone call one day from, I had only been in the band a couple of months, and we were just finishing up writing. We were about to start recording, and we'll talk about the song later. But there was a song, and I just stopped everyone at rehearsal, and I was like, this is a dumpster fire. This is the worst thing I've ever heard. And the next day I got a phone call from Forgy, and he's like, hey man, maybe you don't tell everyone that what we're doing is a dumpster fire. But to my credit, we changed it, and it is a much better song.
I think it was got her hand.
Still the process of doing rehearsals with you guys.
Oh my God, we could have an entire podcast on what it's like to rehearse with 1974. Everybody would have terrible stories.
That's why I swear that's why I shaved my head after I left the band. I was sick of carrying it out.
You had to ritualistically cleanse
I had to
yourself.
cleanse myself.
Okay.
Although I was a nightmare, I will say I was a nightmare to work with a lot of the time.
Everyone is unique.
Yeah. We were a little bit more intense back in the day with Angela. We're not quite as intense nowadays. So.
I was also a baby. I was a baby. I'd never played in a band before. I didn't know how to play the keyboard, and I was playing a 15-minute instrumental.
And you had more than one keyboard, didn't you?
Yes! I had 2 keyboards, and then at one point, I had fucking 3 keyboards. I had 2, one on top of each other, and another one next to me. I didn't even know how to play one keyboard. It was a nightmare. I was, like, trapped in this. It was so crazy. I actually have my keyboard right behind me. It's kind of hard to see, but there she is. She's back there. And in purple nail polish, it says 1974 on the stand.
Oh my God. Beautiful.
Oh my God. So many memories. So many memories. So from War That Tears Apart the Sky, we get into another interesting song that we rarely play live nowadays. And I have a feeling Angela's reaction is going to be the same. Clone Discovery, which we really have not brought back since the days of Angela.
Shame.
Yeah.
Shame.
We put that on the list to learn like several months ago.
Hey, that's my girl. That's my girl. Bring that back.
Actually, what's funny is when I was looking at these songs, when we had that time, we were like, what are we not doing that we want to do? Everybody vote. Maria and I all throughout saw, like, all the choices we picked were from this first album. Like, Wait, Guide Our Hands, Clone Discovery.
Clone Discovery is baller. This song is so good.
Well, I think it just goes to show you that after Laser Fortress, all we did was garbage.
How dare you say that about Kira?
You
How
know I'm
could
kidding.
you?
You know,
Right here, still.
Yeah.
you know I'm kidding. You know I'm kidding.
I don't even remember how that song was written. I know that Gary wrote a lot of the lyrical content, and like the bridge where like just word after word after word get fired off.
Well, let me pause.
Bridge,
Let me pause
I remember writing those lyrics, like
good.
stream of consciousness on the porch, and then it was done. And it felt like it fully encapsulated what was happening in that part of the album and the album itself.
Yeah.
I still like it.
Yeah.
I like it. I wrote it.
A second. We'll talk more about this when it comes to Death of the Herald and Echoes of War, but Gary's style of lyric writing, I think, is much different than, let's say, 4G's. Gary, tell us a little bit when you sit down and it's time for you to write lyrically write a song. Where do you go? What is your process for the lyrical content? Because I think in this particular song, Clone Discovery, I think this is the first time we actually get some pretty intense lyrics, and I give you credit for that.
I think it's entirely stream of consciousness, and then going back and editing like what I think sounds good and what sounds bad, and then that's about it. I try to encapsulate what's happening without making it a narrative. Like, I'm not really good at narrative. I think 4G writes a great narrative lyrics where you can follow what the hell's happening. I feel like I'm more. I try to get the essence of like what's like that specific moment without creating a narrative.
And 4G, what's your process that Gary was just talking about, the more narrative aspect?
So actually, on this song, I don't think I wrote any lyrics on this song. I think it was Gary and Tim. I think Tim wrote the other lyrics. But so my process is, I do have I want to describe an action, or I want to describe a series of events, or I want to describe somebody, or like I have a clear idea of what it is that needs to be told. It's just finding the right words so that it fits the meter of the thing. A lot of my lyrics usually don't rhyme. When they do, it's kind of like I have to think extra hard about it, because it's very limiting to choose lyrics that rhyme, that also work well and move the story forward, and aren't just like, rhyming you with true. So for me, it's usually very literal, very like, this thing is happening, this is what it looks like, here's what it feels like to this person, that sort of thing.
So, Nicole, what made you want to pick this song in the current lineup of the band? What was it about this song that got this on the list for you?
I really like the singing parts. As a singer.
Well, there's a lot of vocals in that song.
Yeah, it's just a cool song vocally, and I think that's where like Nick and I are very opposite, because if the instrumental part sounds great, he's sold and doesn't really, the vocals are whatever after that. But if the instrumental part is garbage, then he won't listen to it. And I'm sort of like the opposite. Whereas if the vocals draw me in, then I love the song immediately. And I'm like, oh yeah, there's other stuff going on, whatever. I mean, that's very reductive. But I think generally, like, if there's vocals that I feel like I can sing, or I like the harmonies, then I'm immediately drawn to that, and that's because I have a vocal background more than anything else.
I think this was the first song that opened 1974 to the world in the sense of being lyrically relevant, and I don't mean in a specific like political way or some sort of ideology. It was just, you go from overture with nothing, you go from intro that is this beautiful harmony, War That Tears Apart the Skies as a sing-along chorus, and now you have a song that is almost the exact opposite of that. It's mind-numbingly difficult to sing along with this particular song. So I think the lyrical content in this, we're only 4 songs into the album, and we've taken stair steps up on this story that is Lazer Fortress. So lyrically, we know this song was monumental for us in creating what would become the 1974 lyrical content and how we approached lyrics. But talk about the riff. There's an unbelievable guitar riff in this. War That Tears Apart the Sky has, such a catchy guitar riff. Who writes the guitar riffs? Who did War That Tears Apart the Sky guitar riff? Who did the Clone Discovery guitar riff? These are staples of what we do now.
I think I did both of them. No, yeah. So I mean, yeah. War That Tears Apart the Sky, I wrote the song. For this song, I don't remember how much of it I wrote, or individuals wrote, or we wrote collaboratively. I'm fairly certain that Gary wrote the chords the melody and the lyrics to that bridge part that he sings. Like I think he wrote that entire thing. When it comes to the what was that?
So I might have. I can't remember.
I think you did. The verses, I don't remember who wrote the music for it. I do remember that my musical contribution to this was that riff that there's no singing over, and trying to find harmonies to the bridge part that Gary wrote, because it was not only is it written in stream of consciousness, when it's sung, the meter changes with every line. There's no like strict meter that you can follow. Like the flow of the words is like stream of consciousness as well. So, and at the time, if we were given, like months to like listen to it and like really commit it to memory so that you can record it, having it memorized, because that's the only way like we would have done that, it would have been fine. But there was a lot of post editing the time for those harmonies, because he would sing his and then he'd sing a harmony on top of his, but it wasn't lined up because the meter would be slightly different the second time, and then I sung a harmony on top of that, and mine was like I didn't know which one I was listening to. So there's a lot of like lining things up in post to make sure that harmony, the rhythm, everyone was singing at the same time. In fact, a tidbit about this song too. Originally, like when we first wrote it, Gary sang the backup part that I sing, and Tim sings the part that he sang originally, but it was down, like way down. So instead of it starting off with "Time moves slowly," it was "Time moves slowly." It was very strange, and Gary go "barely breathing" in the background.
God!
Yeah, we actually changed.
You still have that demo, I think, too.
I still have that demo. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's funny that I think that's a good point. I think that's a turning point in the band where we stopped just writing stuff and saying, "This is mine, I'm doing this, blah, blah, blah." We would listen to it and say, "Does this sound right? Can we switch this? Maybe we should have this person try vocals. Maybe we should have you sing it this way because it sounds better for your vocals." And it wasn't done to perform live. So in other words, it wasn't like, "Oh, you sound like you're straining. Why don't you not sing this song? Because like it will be hard for you to sing it live." Because we weren't playing live. It was more just, if we're going to record the song, we want it to be good. You can't sing that. So someone else has to sing that, or you have to sing it in a different way.
So there was a lot of that began happening in later albums with different lineups of the band. Probably we started with Angela because, and we'll talk about this a little later on, but when we gained Angela, we gained one hell of a voice. But we started doing that at the beginning of maybe the ending process, maybe after the album had been recorded, but I distinctly remember trading vocal parts and kind of doing these round robins of who sang it best or who sings it best. And I think that began a little bit in the ending of the Lazer Fortress days as we were kind of starting to perform it live. Am I correct in thinking that?
Yeah, well, we definitely had to do that for live performances because these songs were not written to be performed live. So when we had to do it live and there was a ton of vocals and we're like, well, how are we going to pull this off and have it sound good? In the original recording of Intro, it's Tim on the bottom and then I'm both harmonies above. So like we gave Angela the top harmony when we do it live. In Clone, people double themselves. So like in the I'm trying to think, whatever the lyric is that reality for this timeline, Gary singing that part. There's two lines being sung behind it which are an octave apart, and Tim sings both of them on the album. Then they switch and Gary does the background again as an octave, and Tim goes, "Gather thee something," I forget. But like, and then I think we just dropped the octave live. And then for the major harmony part in Clone Discovery, I don't think we were able to do the song live until Angela joined the band, because then Gary sang his part, I sang the part above Gary, and then Angela sang the really high part. When on the album, it's Gary at the bottom two voices, and I'm the top voice.
Let me let Angela weigh in. I think she knows your lyric that you were missing there.
Gather your senses.
Thank you.
Essential arms. I love Clone Discovery. I am all with you, Nicole. Bring that back. That song is so good. I remember like we pretty much only did it live a handful of times because like every time I'd beg for it, people were kind of like, let's play Welcome to Earth, and I was just like, no! But I remember like all of us like literally beating out times and like learning all the words for the stream of consciousness part.
Yeah.
And that was some of my favorite shit. That was like, I can get down with this nitty gritty. It was so much fun. And because like nobody had it memorized. Nobody. Who memorizes that?
How could you?
It was insanity.
I had to, though. I had to.
And we had to. I like listening to it today. I like kind of like listened through all the songs and like, you know, would like skip ahead and be like, oh yeah, these are just to remind myself. I listened to all of Clone Discovery, beginning to end. I listened to that song because that bridge is so good. And I think because I'd never written music before, Gary taught me how to write music. Because I remember, and this is like moving forward to the next album, so I won't go too far into it. But when I like originally started with the writing of what was it Herald of Life? Is that the one?
Yes. Yep.
Yes. And me and Gary were on the porch, like outside, and I remember writing lyrics with Gary, and like Gary taught me how to write music, like lyrically, like 100%. And I think that Clone Discovery had a ton to do with the way that I wrote lyrics for anything I wrote in Death of the Herald.
Gary, look at you.
Nice job, Gary.
Yeah.
I
I mean, Clone Discovery is forever my
Good job,
favorite
John.
song on that album.
To speak on why I think we only did it a handful of times live is because that song was not a song we had the luxury of just doing bad. When we played that live, if we got it well, if we did it really, really well, people were like, oh my God. If we so much as missed one beat, that song train wrecked so quick and so bad.
Yeah.
That's totally true.
Yeah, that's not a song that you go, oh, we missed a verse, or oh, I forgot a lyric. That's a song that, and I can distinctly remember at Arch Street, starting that song,
Throwing the song on the
getting about a
floor.
minute into it, and being like,
Yeah, it's
well,
over.
then, yeah,
Yeah. It was going so terribly.
so bad.
I think I
Just
stopped
stop
us. I was like,
playing.
guys, stop. We could do this better, I promise you.
And
Yeah,
what
that was the only one that,
never
like,
instilled any faith in us when we did that is the second it made its way onto a set list, right before we played it, inevitably Tim would reach over the drum kit, look at 4G and go, how does it go again?
Is it 3-4-3-4 or is it 4-3-4-3?
Yeah, and he was
Two or
singing
one,
it,
first
drumming
time.
on it, and he didn't know the lyric or the rhythm until 4G reminded him, and that does not instill faith into a live performance.
Yeah, that was,
It's
that was
like
definitely one of the.
high for him, like to just belt it out right at the beginning.
Oh yeah, and that was the other thing. Is like if we put that in the early, if that was in early in the set, Tim's voice was gone the rest of the set because that thing comes in at a 10.
Right. Like you can't play 3 hours and then like on the very end try to belt that out. Your voice will be gone. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Especially when you're playing Sunday night after you played Friday, Saturday.
Yeah, we were doing a little bit of that too.
Well, and in addition to that, it was also like the timing switch. Like it's not the timing in the first run of the verse is different than the timing in every other verse. So that would trip people off too.
Oh, it's so good.
Why do we do it that way?
It was really stupid. Yeah.
No, it's so cool. It's
No, I like it.
So I think one of the strengths that Laser Fortress has is the layout of the songs, because coming directly after Clone Discovery is Welcome to Earth, which is a completely different turn. You know, you're not getting the same song twice or the same thing stylistically. And I think all of us at this point have played Welcome to Earth, John included. I think. Have you played this with us yet, John?
Not with you, but
Oh, we didn't give you this one to audition on? Well, that was our mistake.
He had one practice after his audition, so
we didn't do too many originals that second time.
So with Welcome to Earth, I have to direct this to Gary. I mean, That bass part in the beginning is phenomenal. How did you get to this bass part?
I wrote that entire song on the outside porch at Tim's house in like 15, 20 minutes. I think we were working on something else, and we just kept like hitting a wall. I forget what song we were working on, and I just decided to walk outside, and I'm like, I'm just going to write something. I just wrote the thing, except for the bridge, which we changed later, but the rest of it was just written right there.
It's phenomenal. It's one of the, I think it's one of the gems in Lazer Fortress, because not only does it serve to change the tonality coming out of War the Terrorists Part the Sky and Clone Discovery, but it doesn't
genres.
What's that?
It changes genres of the album.
Yeah, but it doesn't do it in a jarring way. It does it in this really, really great kind of, removing you from where you were and placing you over here. It's brilliant. So with with Welcome to Earth, the guitar part is very kind of almost like 70s funk in that. Explain where the guitar part came from that overlays Gary's bass part.
Well, Nick Garofalo wrote the clean guitar to that, and then I wrote the like the lead part, which is a lead, but it's actually like it's repeated, so it's not like a solo.
What people would call a melody.
Thank you. That was the word I was looking for.
Melody.
It's the guitar singing. So I think it was like Gary brought in the bass part. Garofalo was like, what are the chord progressions behind it? So he just did it high up with that like weird little like jammy like style, and then that melody is just came out. And then I think, did Tim write the lyrics and the melody for the verses? I think he did.
Yep.
And one of the things with the lyrics that you can kind of actually hear sometimes is us either planting the seed or something. Like we had already written, I think, Guide Our Hands by that point, and you hear the words "guide our hearts" in there, and it was like "guide our," and then it was okay. I also forgot to mention this, but back in Clone Discovery, Tim sings the lyric "Essential Arms." At that point in time, Essential Arms was already we had already established that Essential Arms was a business that was created to sell human consciousness to be downloaded and then re-uploaded. So basically, infinite life extension. We'd already had that concept at that point in time while we were writing that song. And in fact, it was actually Tim wrote it incorrectly, but we stuck with it. It was supposed to be Vital Arms, because it was supposed to double for Vital Arms being like something you need to help you, and also Vital Arms meaning like weapons that are necessary to defend. And he changed it to Essential Arms, but it sounded so much better that we actually kept Essential Arms. And then the only I wrote the one lyric that I sing in it, which is just, is there a way to be honest and call it home? Because the song's about coming back from the epic spaceship battle that they had in space, and then they discover that the spaceship that attacked them are their clones. Welcome to Earth was literally them coming back into to the United Earthlands, and them just kind of seeing that everything is very strange around them, like people are not behaving normally, and like, so is there a way to be honest and call this our home was basically like them understanding that something's wrong here. Because I don't think we ever talked about the story behind Clone Discovery, but that was basically it. In fact, Welcome to Earth was not supposed to be the original. It was not supposed to be the final title. It was originally Welcome to Earth, which is just the Independence Day. And then we never changed it, but we did actually write Earth instead of Earth because we had a little bit of forethought to not put that on an album.
Welcome to Earth.
I think this song is actually one that like people can connect to, not knowing the story, and like it can be pulled out of the story and they can connect to it in their real lives. Like that, is there a way to call us our home? Like it always reminds me of like people going to a new place. Like I just feel like every time I sing it, I think it really resonates with the audience on different levels. Maybe I'm crazy, I don't know.
No, definitely. I mean, one of the things we wanted to do with some of the songs, we wanted to not be too literal. And this song was basically, if you take out the context, it's about being in a situation where everyone around you is not like there's something off, and you feel isolated even though you're around other people. You feel like you don't belong here, or like they don't belong here, or something like that. So that was, and Tim doesn't write literal, so that was a good that was a good style. That was a good.
In terms of Tim stylistically, one of the things I really liked about that song is really introduced kind of this like 90s almost style singing that he has like in the verses. Stylistically was
he has almost like an alternative feel to him.
like that's what it sounded like to me. I was like, oh, okay.
Little
It was-
intimacy.
And very like, oh my God, what's the band?
Oh,
You're
gee.
talking about Silverchair, Angela?
Silverchair, thank you.
Yeah.
Very Silverchair, which is all of Timothy's singing is very Silverchair, but like, I feel like Welcome to Earth specifically was very Tuna in the Briny.
There you go. And yeah, I think, Gary, you wrote the entire thing, including the bridge. We just had more parts of the bridge that we kicked out. It was like originally like a punk bridge to it, right?
Yeah, that's the only part I remember. Oh, so we still had the bridge that we left, but we took out the punk part. Was that what it was?
Oh no, we didn't. You're right. But I think you replaced it. Like you and Tim replaced the bridge you originally wrote with a new bridge. Like I don't think anyone else wrote that.
Yeah, you're probably right. I don't freaking remember.
Gary, you're the best.
I try to remember, man.
Oh, and you know what? I think to go back to overture writing, the da na 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 da 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 da, that wasn't originally in there. I think after we'd written the overture and after we mixed the punk bridge, we put that in there instead.
It's one of those other additions from the overture that we put into another song.
Yeah.
After Welcome to Earth comes, I guess you would consider a ballad, perhaps? Could we consider Wait a ballad?
Yeah, I don't know. What's the definition of a ballad? Definitely not a love song, I can tell you that.
I think so after we get Welcome to Earth, which is a shift in the tonal center of the album, we get Wait. And Wait shifts us again to a much lighter style. Now, by the end of the song, it's big and rock and distorted guitars. But how did Wait come to be? You can almost see the intertwining of Overture and War the Tears Apart the Sky, Clone Discovery, and even by the end of Welcome to Earth, there's the big elongated guitar solo. But Wait really, really, really walks away from all of those songs. So how did Wait come to be? How did that one fit into the mix of this album?
I wrote Wait, I think. I don't remember if I had the intention of writing it for this album. Because the song was written about my father who passed away in March of 2010. But I remember thinking to myself, this could work in the story because the lyrics are basically about you thinking like someone is there, but they're not. And the vision that I had about putting it into Lazer Fortress is like someone goes home to their family, and the family, though physically is there, is part of the hive mind, like the clones that have taken over the planet. So like they're physically there, but they're not. Like, and the realization at the end of the song that person, these people that you've loved, you went away on like a space travel mission, whatever, and then you came back and then they're gone. For me, that space travel mission wasn't space. It was college, going to college and then coming back. My father was gone. But that's how I worked it into the story. And yeah, up to this point, I think every single song has been transitioned with the exception of Clone into Welcome to Earth, because there's the holdout, the feedback holdout that goes into the acoustic between overture and intro. The end of intro is a dominant chord, a dominant seventh that is resolved by the minor in War the Tears Apart the Sky. War the Tears Apart the Sky has this spaceship ethereal thing that transitions right into the time moves slow, which, by the way, so small little fun thing, that little that spaceship passing by at the end of War, part of that is just a guitar track that has a snippet of audio that's just copied and pasted a bunch of times. That's your beep, beep, beep. That's literally a guitar holdout. That's just like a section of the audio. And then there's like a wah sound, which is it's actually, no, I missed. It's a computer mouse held up to the guitar pickups that makes a wah sound.
So again, with Wait, we have
the water, like we have rain that goes into it. Like it's a fade out.
the rain sound. Talk to us about what that rain sound is on that on the beginning of Wait.
I mean, the rain was just sort of like that traditional. It's good. Things are about to get sad, so it's of course going to start raining. and the sound effects is it was native to whatever I think it was Cubase, so it was native to Cubase. That sound effect. I used a keyboard to record that rain sound, and that transitioned into the acoustic, which again was there to set a mood and also to give continuity to the album to make it feel like it's one story. So yeah, it starts off really just like I think an acoustic guitar double tracked with the vocals, and then like shaker comes in, and then little guitars are overlaid, like little licks are overlaid in the second verse, and then keyboards come in the bridge with cymbal work on Tim's part, and then full band comes in after the You Are the One Who Is Gone, give it that sort of like on your knees in the rain, shouting at the sky type of sort of epic feel to the end of the song.
Now, I remember we played this quite frequently in the beginning, but towards the end of our gigging seasons, this song kind of started to fall off the set list. Was there anything that was challenging about this in a live setting? And I think we could even talk a little bit about the vocals on this, because I know Angela ended up taking a lot of the vocals, and we've been trying to work it up over the last couple of years. So maybe even Nicole could even think about this a little bit, how the vocals kind of interplay live with this particular song.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things is it is a very soft song, especially in the beginning. So we are a band that's always been really, really strong when we perform our intense stuff, and like getting those intimate moments was always difficult. It was also fun because Tim and you would always try to get me to laugh during the song. We were performing it live. I'd be singing, it's you I'm waiting to see in the black square, which is just a yes lyric.
Yep. Yes, every fucking time.
And it would make me lose it. Or come really close to losing it. Yeah.
It was
mention a rain stick in here?
Tim's goal to make you crack up in a very vulnerable song because we are assholes.
And yeah, Tim had a rain stick that we would use to simulate the rain during that song too. Like we even had that.
With Wait, we got a lighter, gentler side of 1974, which brings us to one of the more interesting songs, I think, in all three of the albums that make up the Lazer trilogy, Interlude. Interlude, I think, was the precursor to some of the stuff we hear on Echoes, believe it or not. And I certainly think Interlude was a big reason why we got United Earthlands and songs like that. This was the first time we have something, I would say it almost sounds like it was recorded somewhere else and done somewhere else. So, Gary, I know you wrote Interlude, and you played guitar on Interlude. Explain how this came to be, because this is such a different thing to sit almost at the end of a full rock album.
It is. It's true. I think this was part of a series of pieces that I had started writing right after I graduated college and moved home. I was playing around with a lot of folk sounds and like crawhammer guitar, and that happened to be one of the ones that I was probably the most fond of that I had been working on. And I believe I brought it to the band, and I think we just ended up putting it in that part of the album, and I think it fits really well.
Yeah, recording wise, it was recorded in my room, my bedroom. Like I remember, I actually have a video of you sitting on the edge of the bed with it mic'd up, and I remember we weren't terribly concerned about how the mic was going to sound or anything like that, because the idea was to have it sound like it was coming through a speaker. So we mic'd it up, and you just played it like a bunch of times, and like you messed it up, you do it right from the beginning. So like this really long one take, and like there was one in there that was like perfect. So I took it, and then there's a lot of sound effects. So it's supposed to sound like it's coming through a speaker, and you hear one person walk one direction, and then you hear a bunch of other people walk in the other direction, and it was supposed to be sort of like the soldier going into like a secret hideout to discuss how to get rid of like these clones that are all over the earth, and then the soldiers walk by moments later, having just missed finding him. And I think the way it was recorded was like like one of those little pink erasers on my my desktop stand that I had, and I just mic'd it up, and it was supposed to be the footstep, and then going the other way, I just did a whole bunch of them, like one at a time, just layered them on top of each other. It sounds like footsteps, but it was an eraser on a hard surface.
And this song's only like a minute and a half long, right? This is maybe even less than that. This was something very unique. You know, we opened the album with 15 minutes, and then by the time we're at the end, we've dwindled down to what, a minute 10 of the song.
Well, and actually it was another piece put in there just to kind of heighten the idea of there's a story that's happening, there are actions that are happening. The word interlude, it's basically like a theatrical piece. Like it's meant to, there was an intense moment. There's going to be story that's going to happen, but it's not verbal. We're not going to describe to you what's happening. You're just supposed to get this sense of, you hear one footstep go, and then you hear a whole bunch of them go in the other direction. You're like, this is like, it's a little unsettling over this beautiful piece of music that sounds like it's blasted out of like this, little horn that's, 10 feet above the air. So it kind of keeps in the idea that overture is like the opening piece of like a musical number that has themes in it. Intro is, all right, it's kind of like the prologue to like, Shakespearean, tragedies. And then we have this interlude, which is just like, okay, something happened. We're going to take a break right now, but there's story still happening. And then we're going to go right back into the last 3 songs on the album.
We come out of interlude into a return to kind of like a more in-your-face rock style. So we come out of interlude into Guide Our Hands. Guide Our Hands had a very different start in its life to what became Guide Our Hands on the album. 4G, tell me a little bit about how Guide Our Hands started its life.
I don't remember. I really...
What I meant to say was Gary, tell us a little bit about how Guide Our Hands started its life.
Did I write the riff? Did you write the riff, RG? I know I wrote.
Tell us a little bit more about how Guide Our Hands started.
Well, you have to understand.
I think that I wrote the pre-chorus thing.
The bump.
That's all I got.
Bump. You definitely wrote the octaves. I remember
I wrote that.
Well,
that was the song that when we were working on it during that part, Clymer said that it sounded like dog shit.
Again.
This is the infamous song that prompted the phone call from. Yeah, this was the song that caused so many waves in the band. So Guide Our Hands, from my recollection, had more of kind of a punk rock feel to it in its infancy, if that rings any bells to anyone. And then after 4G called me and told me to be nice and not tell everyone that their song was dog shit, he tasked me with the typical, if you think you can do better, then go ahead and do better. And I showed up to rehearsal with the keyboard part that now is Guide Our Hands. And she has never called to tell me to think I can do better.
Hey, it worked.
You had me learn that song the first time I auditioned for the band, when you were really wanting someone to do keys and sing. And I could not transcribe it. And I just sucked. I remember like that song. I was just like, well, whatever. Hopefully my voice is good, but yeah. Yeah,
this was pretty much my only contribution in the writing process to Lazer Fortress. By the time I had joined the band, most of this album was not recorded, but certainly done. The overture was done. Most of the riffs and the guitar parts were done, and the lyrics and vocals were done. This along with maybe the end of a song or two. Maybe the keyboard part and temps were the only things that hadn't been written yet. And so with Guide Our Hands, this was my first time to write with 74, and that's where this keyboard part came from. Because it wasn't just like comping chords on an organ or
which is all I can do.
Yeah, so it wasn't like comping chords, and it wasn't doubling up a guitar riff or something like that, and or playing a little keyboard part that Dan Niederhauser had already written for the overture or something. So in reference to what Nicole was saying, Angela, how did you feel about having to learn the Guide Our Hands keyboards parts.
I can tell you this. When you wrote it, it wasn't played the same way every time. Like, it was improv-y a little bit.
Ah, yes. Wong, wah, wah, wong, wah, 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 wah. Yes. I actually remember we were playing a show once at this, like, really fancy venue, and I was, like, brand new to the band, and they had, like, a real piano and everything. And, like, I was sitting there, and Guide Our Hands sheet music was in front of me, and, like, I just looked at Clymer and I said, I don't know how to play this. And I, like, was freaking out. I was, like, going into full panic mode. And I played it. I practiced it, like, a lot with the band. I played it live with the band. And I just zoned. Mm-hmm. I just, like, forgot how to play Guide Our Hands, because if you thought too instrumentally about it, which was how I think about keyboard parts, then you can't do it. You almost have to, I think of, like, Clymer's voice in Forgy's hands just being like, blah, 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 blah. Like, don't think too hard. Like, you need to just, like, jelly fingers this out. And that's how I played it ever since, was just, like, jelly fingers. Like, you can't think. You just have to know that you know it. Like, eventually I wouldn't use, like, the sheet music for that part, because, like, if I thought too hard I couldn't do it. It was, like, a weird, I don't know, that song is really weird to play. It's like, once you get it in your muscle memory, I could probably whip that thing out and play it right now. But, like, before I got it into the muscle memory, God, it was a nightmare.
Yeah. It's fun to listen to.
Very fun. And, like, once I understood how to do it, I loved playing it, and it was very exciting to play. And I would do that weird bullshit I used to do on stage, where I'd play the keyboard but I'd be underneath it on all that fun jazz that nonsense up. And I used to play it, like, underneath the keyboard, because, like, once you got it, it was so much fun. But no, learning it was a bitch.
I sincerely apologize.
No, it's okay. Again, it's great. Once you get it, you got it.
Well, it was an attempt, because by the time we'd gotten, like, I think we had started to know kind of the arrangement of where things were going to go in the particular album. Yeah. And it seemed at that point that we could do kind of almost like a little Stevie Wonder-y, funky, superstition-y type of, Wurlitzer part. Although he plays his on a clavinet, but like a Wurlitzer part in that particular part of the album. And it made sense. It, like, even with what was happening in the story, it made sense as to why this song would take this tonality to it. Yeah. And let me jump into what the vocals are doing, because the harmony in this is pretty unique.
Well, first of all, just to wrap up the whole keyboard thing, I remember when I got the audio for it, I was like, it has that Wurlitzer sound, but it sounded distorted, and I was like, hey, because I remember you recording this, like, you were in your place in Brantford, like, and I fell asleep on your couch because it was late, and, like, you were just hammering it out. And I remember listening to it, I was like, you're gonna hate me, but, like, I think the track is distorted. I think that, like, the volume was up too high, and there's, like, crunchiness on it. And you're like, no, it sounds great. It's like, okay. So, and that's what's in there. It has, like, a distortion on it. I think that comes from it being, like, I think it was hitting the recording, like, whatever we were recording onto. I think it was hitting it a little hard, and it has, like, distortion on it, but we kept it, and that's the sound of that.
That's the way that sounds now.
Yes, the way that's that sound now. So yeah, the harmonies are, it's like one is here, and then the other one's like a third above it, and the other one's a half step above it. It's a strange harmony behind it, and it's really hard to pull that off and not have it sound awful. Because
if you don't hit it right, then it's fucked, and there's no saving it.
Exactly.
Very true.
That is a tough harmony. I think at some point in time we stopped doing the vocal harmony, and Angela, you were just doing the keyboard, like, notes behind it, just because we couldn't hit it consistently live.
Yeah.
It just wasn't meant to be performed live. All this stuff when we were writing it was supposed to be, here's the album, listen to it. Like, we didn't have any intention of trying to recreate this stuff. God, why would we?
So with Guide Our Hands, not only was it one of another one that, like, if we didn't do it right live, it was terrible. But but we ended up doing it a lot. So was Guide Our Hands, the ending of Guide Our Hands essentially revisits the overture.
The main riff in the overture, yeah.
Yeah. So question was that done in reference to the overture, or was the overture's riff done in reference to Guide Our Hands?
No, overture came first. Like, that riff was the first thing ever written, anything having to do with overture, so it took from that. The thing is, it's a really intense moment because it's the moment that the squad goes to the moon, which is the moon base from Echoes of War, and destroys the instrument of doom that is creating the hive mind, which is, okay, short backstory. There's a thing called the instrument of doom on the moon, which is like, has this giant hive mind collective, which is like streaming and broadcasting into all of the clones around, which is kind of spreading like a virus. So the squad goes to the moon to blow that up, and Guide Our Hands is like, it's 5 people against an army of clones, so it's probably not going to work, but they end up doing it anyways. And that explosion into the overture part is, I think, them blowing up the moon, which is where the moon base is.
I think he says.
Yeah, I don't know. That Tim wanted to happen was a moon blow up. And the way I justify this is maybe it's not the full moon, maybe it's just a piece of the moon, so we still have a good section of moon left. But yeah, we blow up the moon in the song.
At that point, we could have almost ended the album because, we start with the overture, we end with the overture. But from there, we go into temps. Temps isn't just the word temps. It's actually TEMP''S.
Yeah.
And temps is...
Temporary existence of mortal person. It was a nickname that was given to people that did not undergo the infinite life extension. So, the technology existed to download your consciousness digitally, and then if you died for any reason, you could take that digital consciousness and put it into a clone, and then you would just keep living your life from where you last downloaded, sort of thing. Temps was a sort of like, it's like a slur that people that were okay with cloning gave to people that were not okay with cloning. There was a whole movement of people that were anti that technology for religious reasons or for philosophical reasons or whatever, and they were called the temps. They're going to live one life and die, and they're stupid for doing that. And the clash between the temps and other society actually is a part of the Death of the Herald, with Vera Hunter being the leader of the temps, sort of like the voice of them. So yeah, so in this song, after the moon base explodes and the instrument of doom is destroyed, all of the clones that were feeding off of the moon base are now just, they just drop because there's nothing feeding them anymore. There's no hive mind going streaming into their brains. And the only people left on Earth were the people that weren't streaming from the moon base, which is mostly just temps, just people those were like the only people left that hadn't been taken over by the clones, because there were no clones to take them over, and they were in hiding pretty much throughout the entirety of this album. I always like to think that an interlude, it's the squad that's attacked goes into the temps is like sort of one of the hideouts and sort of plans for, like, they catch them up. This is what's happened on Earth since you've been gone. This is where the thing is. Everyone thinks that you're a clone because you were actually cloned and they attacked you, but you can spin it as you finally destroyed your counterparts, and you can gain access to going to the moon and ending this thing. So the song Temps is about all of those people coming out of hiding and just seeing just like a sea of bodies. 99% of the world is now like gone forever, and just having to deal with the loss, like a huge loss, at the same time that you're trying to now move civilization forward.
So temps is essentially a derogatory term given to people that chose not to do this hive mind, correct?
That chose not to clone. I mean, the hive mind was only there for when the clones started taking over. The idea was that instead of cloning yourself every single time and using just your mind, if you put all the minds together, you can build a better society. And that's when the clones started sharing, like uploading their own minds and like combining them and then streaming that. And that's why they decided to take over the planet Earth, was because like they were now a superior, being, and they didn't need their original counterparts, which could only have one thing going at a time. So they started killing and taking over. And that's the bad guy premise of Fortress.
I don't think I can remember, maybe once, and I think Angela, we did this when we did the 2 albums back to back, but I don't think we ever played this one live, but maybe once.
Yeah, no.
Well, a few times.
it's not again, it's very low energy until the very end, and even the end is like, like when we do songs live, we try to bring like the epic sort of like grandiose songs. This song is a lot more subtle musically. There's some interesting things happening. Like Nick wrote the guitar part, which is the I think it's a G and a B minor. I think.
No.
But Gary play. Thank you, Nick. Appreciate that. But Gary plays, instead of the G major and a B minor on top of that, Gary does the B minor first on top of the G and then goes to a D. So it sounds like the guitar is going major minor. It sounds like the bass is going minor major, which is just very interesting, sort of like they switch there. It's diatonic. It all sounds like it fits, but it was just an interesting.
Again, this was, such minor contributions I had with those keyboard swells just to spice it up, to keep some sort of tonal center.
Yeah, and you doubled Nick's guitar part.
Yeah.
So we had 3 different instruments playing 2 different sort of like feels.
Yeah.
Yes. I don't even think did I even play guitar on this song? I don't even know if I play guitar on this song. Oh yeah, I did which is a melody. There's no, you can put that over a lot of different chords. So it was ambiguous when I came up with that arpeggiated chorusy sort of thing. It's ambiguous what chords are supposed to be underneath it. So you guys took full advantage of that and made it very ambiguous by doing that.
That brings us to the end of the album, which is Song of Survivors, and what was there a conversation or was there a conscious thought to end the album on an acoustic song? And when I say acoustic, I do mean there's djembe in it, there's acoustic guitar. I played a mandolin part to it. There's a saxophone part to it. There's gang vocals. It's such a contrast to anything else aside from maybe Interlude that is on this album.
Yeah, this song was really fun because in the band, at the time it was Nick Garofolo, it was me, Adam, it was you, Gary, it was you. That was the song that I feel like we sort of used the creativity of recording in order to tell the story, because the song is supposed to be, okay, so the moon base explodes because the squad, blows up the hive mind, blows up the instrument of doom, and it creates this giant EMP that wipes out all technology on Earth. From the moon. I know that's very far-fetched, but that was our story. And now there's no electricity. There's no, unless things are moving due to gas or steam or whatever like that, everything it's basically going back to the Industrial Revolution. So because we were so used to that, it was a song that we wanted to do without electricity, meaning no electric guitars or anything like that. We did end up using, the bass was electric. We didn't have an acoustic bass. But the bass is the only thing on there that was an electric instrument. And it starts off with, we wanted to give a feel of what would music sound like if all of a sudden there was no electricity anymore. And we thought back to sort of tribal drumming sort of thing. So we start the song with it sounding like a field recording. So we put a stereo mic pair up far away. And we put mics right up on the things that we were drumming. So there was a djembe, there was a conga, and I actually think I was playing an iMac box with drumsticks. And then at the beginning of the thing, we record using the distant stereo pair, and that includes vocals. We set up a vocal stereo pair, at the opposite end of the sun porch from where we were singing. We sang, we played drums, and everything was recorded just with 2 microphones. And then when the second verse comes in, there's a switch between the faraway mics and the close-up mics, so that the sound quality gets a little bit less rough. It's less of a field recording. It's more of a a professional sort of sound, but it's the same instruments with the addition of an acoustic guitar. A mandolin comes in later. A bass comes in later. At the very end, there's a saxophone and a flute and a fake trumpet. To give it the sense that all these people are coming together and building a song with whatever instruments that they have. And obviously Song of Survivors, it's about all the temps that have survived the devastation. And the lyrical content of the song is very how do we deal with these things? We don't have electricity, we don't have heat, we don't have anything to cool off. We have to pick up the pieces of civilization and rebuild again.
That's pretty much the premise of what Lazer was, from top to bottom. So let me ask you a quick question here. By the time the album was done, had the story been hashed out at that point that it was going to be more than one album, or did we think once we got to Song of Survivors that was it?
We should really go around and say that, because I don't know what that is for everyone else, but for me, I don't think we had an intention of doing, at the end of Lazer Fortress, we didn't have the intention of doing a prequel. Like Song of Survivors was actually, I think, the last song written for Lazer Fortress. I remember that being, because when we went to record it, we didn't know what it would sound like. We had a very rough idea of what that song was going to sound like, because it was just written. But no, I don't think so. I think that we had a backstory to justify everything that happened in Lazer Fortress, but it was only there to justify everything that happened in Lazer Fortress.
I think we said it as a gag, like we would put out as many albums as seemed ridiculous at the time. We're like, yeah, we'll just do like 9 albums, and it'll be our entire musical career. And I was kind of kidding.
The George Lucas effect.
So
You got a lot to say in this band.
yeah. We'll keep doing it. Okay, and I definitely took that to heart. So we wrote, at least 2 more, and we were discussing more as well as more of a gag, but I figured there'd be a little bit more than just the one.
We start with a 15-minute overture. We end on an acoustic song. There's a shift in band members in the middle of the writing of this. Dan Niederhauser leaves. I come in. Very shortly after, Nick Garofalo departs the band. What was the premise of why he left? Why did he not want to stick around to hang out and do Herald and Echoes and everything else we haven't done?
Yeah, I think I'm trying to remember this because I'm the one that I think he told that he was going to leave the band. Like I was the first one that he talked to about it. I think I remember him saying that he wanted a project where he can like hang out, casually write music, have a drink or two, and like that's his life. And I think we were starting to plan out having shows, like decent shows, and we were trying to figure out how we're going to make this thing work live. So that's a huge undertaking. That's a huge undertaking for 5 people to figure out how you're going to pull off this massive, like, triple, quadruple tracked guitar, stacked harmonies, all that sort of stuff. Like how are we going to perform that live? And at the time, I can tell you, my voice was awful. Like maybe it sounds good on the record, but that's studio magic right there. Like it was awful. And we did not sound really good when we were harmonizing. So we were starting to, it was less about just writing music and putting it out there. It was more about, okay, we need to get good at performing this. And that's just not what he wanted. He wanted to write and have fun. And practice can be pretty, everyone that's here knows practice can be very daunting. It can be extremely repetitive. It could be very challenging. It could fill you with self-doubt. And I don't think that those really, sort of deep commitments are ones that he had. Like he wanted a very casual project.
That brings us to the joining of Angela.
Well, before that happened, may I say, as soon as Nick was out, Clymer was like, I'm done with keyboards. I'm on guitar. I want to do guitar. I want to do guitar in this band.
Well, I was not as versed as a keyboard player as I was as a guitar player. So as much as it would have been fun to keep doing keys, and I'm sure I would have become a better keyboard player, it was just, I was so much more comfortable with a guitar in my hand. So we had an opportunity to look for a guitar player or a keyboard player. I think it was a no-brainer. It was just, Angela was in when we heard her kind of sing a little bit, and we knew what we were going to get. And it definitely opened up some opportunities moving forward, and it certainly improved our live presence for sure. Because a lot of the weird vocal stuff that we couldn't do, we could do now, which was nice.
We had an actual female vocalist and not me pretending to be a female.
Right, yeah.
Granted, I'm a soprano, and we all know it.
The album art, why? Why is it the Earth? What was this? It's the battle for the Lazer Fortress. But the album art, explain how we got our branding.
Okay, a good question. Well, the album cover, I needed something that I could do because I can't do anything. Like I'm not good at photography. I'm not good at like like design or anything like that. So like I was like Laser Fortress. So there's a fortress, you know, the fortress around the Earth that stops people from coming in, which the clones turned on to keep people from actually leaving the Earth, so they can invade and kill and stuff. I was like, all right, so we need a red grid around the Earth. So I found a picture of the Earth. I was like, I found a picture of a red grid. I was like, I'll just fade one into the other, and it's in space, right? So we'll do a little solar flare right there, and that's it. And then for the font, we wanted something very sci-fi-y. So I found a font that I liked, and I was like, there it is. There's our font. And now I think we've used that font ever since.
For those of you who've played, you know, Modern lineup, Nick and Nicole and John and past and present members, what are some of the joys of playing anything off of Laser Fortress, and what were some of the really challenging parts that pretty much kept songs from being live, or essentially kept songs from ever being performed?
One word: harmonies. They are the greatest joy of my existence, but they could become the greatest shit show of a live performance.
Yep.
And it was just like, it just took one person being off, or one fucking sound guy who just like totally fucked us. It just took like one kink, and the vocal harmonies could destroy what was otherwise going fine.
There were times they were great, and there were times, and I don't sing, so but there are times when it was just, you know, you're right. You know, you'd have a sound guy that wouldn't turn one of us on or something like that. So you would get, instead of the main melody, you get the person singing the third, and you're like, well, that sounds a little weird.
Right. Or God forbid, like the instruments were all fucked up, so you couldn't hear anything from like the bass, but you could only hear everything from the keyboard, which you never wanted when I was playing the keyboard. And then you hear all these vocal harmonies that were like working with the bass line and not the keyboard, and you're like confused to why they're happening. So even though vocal harmonies are like one of the fucking coolest things about 1974 on the albums, they're definitely the most difficult thing live, because doing anything live is kind of a crapshoot.
I think another thing that we struggled with live was a lot of sound people did not enjoy the fact that we had a singing drummer, and Tim did a lot of the heavy lifting for the singing, and I think that would, you know, we played a lot of places where the sound people were, you know, just hanger outers. They weren't pros by any means.
You remember the show in Jersey?
I remember the show in Jersey very well. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about that next week when we talk about Harold. We'll
That's
talk
like
about
Grand
that.
Fromage. Is that the one I'm thinking of?
Or Grand Fromage. We'll talk about that next week. So John, if you could pick, I know, again, I apologize. You know, you've only been in the band a short while here, because the second you got in, we all had to go on quarantine. But if you had to pick a song that we don't play live off of Lazer.
So when I've been in the band, we've only done War and Welcome to Earth live, and then we did Song of Survivors once.
Oh, did we do that at the Zen
War
Bar?
and Earth. Yeah, we did it once in an acoustic. We did it acoustically.
Oh, that must have been so nice.
So John, what's your pick of bringing a song back into the mix?
When I used to follow, like when I quote unquote used to follow you guys, because mainly I was sharing bills with you guys, like I didn't know what the names of the songs were. I didn't, like, now that I'm in the band and I'm learning this.
I still don't.
Yeah. Well, now I'm like, oh, okay. Well, this is okay. I remember this song. Like I'll have flashbacks of like hearing like a song. Like I remember you guys played the Apple Harvest one time in Glastonbury.
Oh.
Was
that the year that it rained and it rained?
Yeah.
And it rained?
Horrible. But that was a great show. And like I'll have flashbacks of like, oh, I remember when I first heard that song here or there, but like I'm still not 100% sure what you guys even do live at this point. So I'm going to take it back.
We're rehashing out what we do live. It's a different time. It's a simpler time.
I will say, like with Welcome to Earth.
No, stop it! No one here knows that.
What?
Sorry,
He referenced an album from ages past that doesn't even come up on Apple Music.
Nope.
I like to get it in there every now and then.
The Climber story.
Cha-cha-cha.
It's like I never left.
So, Nicole, what you said you like Clone, but what would you bring back? Clone, or would you bring back another song?
For me, as a musician in my personal background, like now that I'm in the band, I really get the music a lot more. But I grew up with more like singer-songwriter stuff, so Song of Survivors was immediately like, oh, I get that. Like it just clicked with me. So I really like that, but I also know it doesn't fit every scenario. And I really like Wait. I just do. I like how it builds up, and I know it's a little slow, but I really like that. Yeah, I don't know. And Welcome to Earth, I think Tim used to sing a big part of it, and Maria and I have split that. Mm-hmm. And I kind of like that. I don't know. We do that with a lot of songs.
How about you, Nick? What song were you jonesing to get behind the kit and get live?
Well, I'd love to play Clone Discovery because you told me to learn it, and I did, and then we never played it.
The cruelty! Made him learn Clone and then never played it?
Yeah, and then we never did anything. I'm from the side, honestly, I'd love to do Overture only because it's like bringing back, like if we had longer sets, like be more theatrical, have something, do Song of Survivors and do Overture, like do some cool random shit like that. But I'd like to at least get through Clone once would be really cool.
Hell yes.
Well, I think, the second we're allowed to come out of our houses and be social with other people, Clone's going to be on the list. So John, get to learning Clone along with the other 300 songs we told you.
I would come back to Connecticut and sing Clone Discovery with you if you did it live. That is how strongly I feel.
Careful what you wish for. Angela, tell us what was your favorite song to perform off of Lazer?
So I would say that my favorite one to perform, obviously, I've been pontificating about Clone endlessly because there's this one part during like the madness, the stream of consciousness. What is it?
Consciousness runs everywhere like Lazer.
Like Lazer. Boy, you know me so well. That one part, like when we did it live, I remember singing and like I didn't have to play the keyboard at all, and I was just like so into it, and oh my god, I loved it. But if we were gonna pick like my favorite song other than Clone Discovery, which we all know that I will pontificate endlessly on, I would say probably Welcome to Earth. It's just like the harmonies, the harmonies in the chorus are so tight. And again, like we were saying earlier, I think Nicole brought it up, like you don't have to know this is a concept album when you hear that song. You can hear that song anywhere and immediately relate to it in one way or another. And like, that song's really powerful when it comes to that. I think that that's a song that a lot of people who listen to 1974 or have seen 1974, a lot of people would say that Welcome to Earth, or they wouldn't even say the name because they wouldn't know it. They'd be like, oh yeah, that song. Like, I've had people like in the past who would be like, what's that one song? And they were usually talking about Welcome to Earth.
Well, to be fair, so like your dance moves during that song were always awesome, and people remember that.
The Broken Robot?
Broken Robot. Like, that's the song it really came out in, and like, we gained half of our fans, I think, from you dancing like that. Just saying. Credit where credit's due.
I still dance like that.
Awesome.
That was definitely the song that drew me to you guys.
Yeah?
And doing shows with you guys, that was always the one I was looking forward to.
Oh.
That was
such a good song.
Yeah.
Forgimus, what's your favorite to play live, buddy?
I honestly think my favorite out of the entire album to play live is the Overture.
I knew it.
Or at least maybe the Shorterture if we can't get through the entire thing.
Oh, God, the Shorterture.
I'll second the Shorterture. I used to love playing Shorterture.
Yeah.
That first riff, I mean, it's the first riff written for anything on the album, and it's just like it smacks you in the face. Like, it's so good.
Yeah. No, the Shorterture was... How short was it, though? It was still like 10 minutes.
It was still like 6 minutes long, but...
oh, my God, I felt like an entire...
we had this 15-minute overture, like opus, crazy thing. And then we were like, well, we can't do this live because at that point we were playing shows, band bills of 10 bands. We had 30 minutes and you can't do that. So we then did the shortature, which was like the first 3 minutes. It really was. It was the riff. We cut out one riff chorusy thing, played the dual guitar harmony, and then that was the end of it. And then all of a sudden we started getting shows where we could play an hour. And then we had the mediumature, which was we put the thing we took out back. And then we played a little bit further past the dual guitar solo, and then that was the mediumature. But we've only ever played the full overture maybe twice. So I think I might have to second that. I think definitely the shortature. I don't know if I have any desire to do the whole overture, says the guy who's been in the band for 10 years. But but I think I'm with Nick. Let's do Clone or the Overture. Let's do it. This has been awesome, and I want to thank Gary, Dione, and Angela Doherty, who we're so glad to see you again, John Dotson, Nick and Nicole Dickinson, and the good old Mike Forget there. So I just want to say this has been great. Thank you guys so much. This was fun, and I hope we can have all of us back with more. Oh my God, it was so fantastic seeing everyone, seeing faces I haven't seen